today, you made a video about why Muslim women shouldn't be Muslim, or why women in general should not choose the Muslim faith because of its attitude towards women. But then you went on a tirade of comments, and you've made comments in the past, and just your whole attitude towards women has become relevant to this situation because you claim that they should become Christians or should stay Christian, but yet your attitude towards women is directly related to your faith. You yourself in your actions and your comments make that known. You show your true colors that way. And this is why women are leaving the churches in droves. Women are, seeking spirituality that puts them on the same footing as men. And they don't understand why they should be inferior or submit to men for that reason. But yet, your verbiage and your language suggests that you think that women are inferior to men. How does it make sense that a woman that was not brought up indoctrinated to think that she's inferior to men would choose a faith that says that God is loving, but you are lesser of a gender than your male counterparts? It makes no sense. Therefore, what I don't understand is why you would think a woman would actively choose a religion in which she is inferior. But your comments show that you think that women are second class. So the first comment right here, where you call Chris an effeminate male that submits to women, you say, you are a effeminate male that submits to women, you are weak. Here's the problem with that comment. What you're effectively saying is that to be female is to be weak, and to be male is to be strong. And a man that may have effeminate characteristics is therefore lesser of a man and therefore second class to other men. So you yourself are using language that shows that you don't like women. Because if you liked women, then you would put them on equal footing to men. In this one right here, you refer to the goddess as a slut or a whore. Many times, if you referenced in other videos as well, that the goddess is somehow of ill repute. And here's the problem with that. The problem is that, first of all, there are many goddesses who are virgin goddesses. But in addition to that, there are polyamorous male gods as well. So, what I don't understand is why you aren't saying the god is a slut. And you focus so much on women and women's sexuality. And the reason is because you, just like Christianity and the Christians that came before you, all the way back to your Jewish roots, realize that women have sexual power. See, women are able to do something that comes directly from sexual intercourse, and that is conceive. Now, in ancient culture, all they knew was that, when sex happened, a woman became pregnant. So a lot of early cultures focus on the woman being the giver and bearer of life. And therefore, it was the ability of men to try to take that and turn that around. And I'm not saying that Christians were the only ones that did this. Aristotle did it as well. But men, therefore, saw that women were able to do this thing that they weren't able to do. They were able to create from this sexual act. And therefore, they equated women's power to their sexual power. And so, in order to dominate society, you have to demonize sex in order to make women seem inferior and therefore dirty and demonize, as a result. This is why you've got people like Tertulian, who wrote in AD 197, saying that women were the gateway to the devil. Now, a little known interpretation about the story between Adam and Eve was that the apple that Eve tried to, and successfully, tempted Adam with was actually her aura of sexuality and her sexual nature. He gave in to her sexual nature and therefore became either on equal footing with her or submitted his sexual power to hers. This was considered to be the ultimate sin in Jewish society, where men were supposed to be on top and women on bottom. And Lilith, who was a very sexual, powerful woman, was considered to be evil and demonized by, early Jews because she wanted to be on top. And she wanted to be dominant in sexual position even. This is another example of where women's sexuality and women's sexual power has been demonized by the church. But this, in your attitude, directly reflects this age-old assumption that women are inferior because of their sexual nature. You talk about women being serving their goddess by embodying her, and to represent a goddess would be a sacred prostitute as a whore in service to the goddess. They would be worshipped as an incarnation of the goddess. Here's the problem. The problem is that really Christian churches where you've got usually a male priest or some sort of minister up there preaching the word of God and doing his service to God with the Holy Spirit supposedly inside him, is doing exactly the same job as that priestess was to the goddess. The difference here is that when you have a single male asexual god, sex doesn't come into the picture as relevant. But when you have God and goddess, and both are on equal footing and are both considered to be creatrixes of the universe, you understand that comes forth through a sexual process of union between the two. And therefore, sex goes from being this outside, foreign, alien thing from believing in God to a very relevant process, and a very relevant spiritual process and spiritual progression. The difference is that pagans don't think sex is evil. They don't understand or comprehend the way that you do that sex is evil. And really, there's no logical reason to think sex is evil. I dare you, I double dare you to come forth and try to prove without a doubt that sex is evil. Please try. You and Chris got into a scuffle about sex. Chris had made a comment about basically the same kind of innuendo that I made about, people who demonize sex usually have a lacking of sex in their social life. You go from saying, ask clown, why did you remove the comment calling women pussy? Well, Chris didn't call women pussy, he just simply said that he had more sex than you in a slang term way. But then you go straight into, you like them fat women too. Can't you get a good-looking woman there, Mr. Stud? As if women themselves are subject only to their looks. By doing this, what you did was basically say that a woman's value lies only in her physical appearance, and that somehow I am of lesser value because you somehow judge my physical appearance as less than appealing. I admit that I'm not the skinniest woman on earth, but I'm definitely not fat. And I'm definitely not ugly, and I definitely don't think that you have any room to judge me when it comes to looks. But I find this funny because, and 9 times out of 10 it's men, when they get into an argument with me, they will, instead of debating me logically and debating me on what I say, they'll instead say things like you're fat or you're ugly. It happens almost all the time when a man cannot win a battle of wits with me. If he can't beat me intellectually, he will try to demean my sexual nature by the first thing out of every stupid man's mouth on YouTube about me is I'm fat. Which, I lost 40 pounds this year, so if anybody wants to fucking call me fat, I'll laugh in their fucking face because all my clothes fit me again. And the second thing is that I'm ugly, and so I don't think I'm the most beautiful person on earth, and I don't think I'm the skinniest person on earth, but I think that it's honestly really funny that no matter what the religion, the stupid men on YouTube who can't beat me in an intellectual argument always resort to you're fat and you're ugly. It's hilarious. And I'll give you an example. The Amazing Atheist did the exact same thing I made a comment supporting someone that he didn't support. That was all I did. There was no sex put in this comment whatsoever. And he replied to my comment with, "Didn't you ask me out once and I turned you down?" As if I'd ever ask out that nasty piece of shit. But, I just found it funny that he had to then revert back to my sexual nature instead of debating me intellectually. Men who see women as objects think that women are simply material objects and only value their looks. And therefore, will try to hit them in a place they think is vulnerable instead of, debating them intellectually. It's hilarious. Now, Saunders, you comment that women in Islam look like zombies and that, in Christianity women don't look like that. But the funny thing is that the reason that women in Islam dress like that is because men think that a woman's beauty is so powerful that it should not be, released for men to be tempted by. And the funny thing about this is that your own attitudes towards sex and women as sexual objects leads down the same path as the reasoning behind the women in Islam dressing the way that they do. So you're actually advocating that style of dress by the attitudes that you convey. And there are many Christian authors, and I'll mention Tertulian again, because if you look in his writings, he talks all about women and women who don't dress in a chaste manner, who are tempting men into these thoughts of sexual deviance. And so the whole idea behind women in Islam dressing like that is supported by Christianity and Christian ideology as well. Now, when it comes to Sharia law, one might say, well, it's obvious that Islam treats women worse because of Sharia law. But really, when you think about it, the only difference is there are still countries where Islam runs the government. So in other words, it's a church-run government. The whole idea is that there are very few countries in this world where, Christianity runs the government. There used to be a lot of them, and when that happened, of course, we had things like the Malleus Maleficarum, which, slaughtered hundreds of thousands of women, possibly. And, there was a lot of things that were similar to Sharia law. In addition, even in early colonial United States, when the settlers came over here and brought their religion with them, they also had a lot of executions and severe punishments for women for being sexually deviant and falling outside of the norms of their Christian ideology. And so to say that within Christianity there's nothing like Sharia law is absolutely ridiculous, because if you read the Old Testament and the New Testament, you'll see all over the place things that are very similar to Sharia law. And, Saunders himself says that women should submit to their husbands. And that's exactly what, what Muslims think, is that women should be submissive to their husbands. In fact, in most traditional mosques, the women pray behind the men so that men will not be subjected to, distraction, sexual distraction while praying. And so in both religions, you see this kind of obsession over women and sex, and the two are kind of intermingled together. And therefore, because there is this intermingling between women and sexual attraction, taking away from a man's spirituality and a man's ability to lead, they then demonize both and show women as just simply material objects and no longer just the creators of life, and sex itself as a deviant act that should only be done inside the confines of marriage, and even then, only done specific ways and only for procreation. In fact, there were early Christian scholars who suggested that Christians should not even get married or have sex at all, and that doing so takes one away from their spirituality and their connection to God, because they then have more earthly connections, and the woman represents the earthly material world, and the man represents the spiritual world because he's connected more closely with God. And this is not something that I made up. These are early Christian scholars, early Christian fathers. I have a book that was written all about anti-feminist literature and the things that the early church fathers said. It's called Women Defamed, Women Defended, and I will post a link in the sidebar if anybody wants to get the book because it's fantastic. And so, really, what you have is religions that are creating a sexual deviant culture, and therefore you have things like pedophilia that come out of this. And look at all the priests in the churches, not just Catholic priests, but priests and ministers and stuff that have this sexually deviant nature because they're going against their regular nature. They've suppressed their sexual desire for so long that it has to come out. I think that if we had modern paganism run the world where men and women are both usually considered equal in most pagan religions, and there's not this obsession of sex being evil, you probably wouldn't see all this sexual deviancy. One last comment that I want to say about you calling the goddess names and stuff like that. I understand that you don't believe in those gods, but, I personally believe in Tartarus, and I think that, when you willfully blaspheme against the gods, that you're not really earning their favor. So, if I were you, I just wouldn't want to be in your shoes right now.